The phone rang at 3:15 a.m. while I was elbow deep in the primary coolant control panel, watching fault indicators flash red across a system that was bleeding $1.2 million per day. Ice pelted the windows of the Susquehanna Valley Nuclear Station control room as I worked to isolate a cascade failure that had knocked our main reactor offline 31 hours earlier. When the phone buzzed against my hip, I almost ignored it. But 25 years in nuclear safety engineering teaches you that 3 a.m. calls usually mean someone's world is about to get a lot worse. My name is Heath Coleman. I'm 55 years old, and I just got the most expensive phone call in corporate history. Heath speaking. Heath, it's Roger Daniels calling from Chicago. I need to inform you of a company decision. Effective immediately, we no longer require your services as senior nuclear safety engineer. Your employment with Apex Nuclear Services is terminated as of today. I looked at the control panel in front of me. Primary coolant, pump showing cavitation warnings, backup cooling system offline for manual inspection, emergency protocols active on reactor unit 1. Patricia Morgan, the plant manager, standing 10 feet away with that look people get when their career depends on someone else fixing an impossible problem. I understand, I said, keeping my voice level. I'll inform the plant manager that you'll be handling the reactor crisis I'm currently managing. Silence. Long enough that I thought the connection might have dropped. What reactor crisis? The primary coolant system failure that brought me to Pennsylvania yesterday. Unit 1 has been offline for 31 hours. We're losing approximately $1.2 million per day in power generation, and the Pennsylvania Power Authority is demanding immediate resolution. I'm in the middle of diagnosing a pump cavitation issue that's cascaded into the backup systems. More silence. I could hear him breathing. Heath, let's discuss this after you've resolved the situation. I don't think that's appropriate, Roger. You just terminated my employment. I shouldn't be working on Apex projects if I'm no longer an Apex employee. I'll brief Patricia on what I've found so far and catch the next flight home to Michigan. Wait, Heath, let me... I ended the call. Before I explain what happened over the next 72 hours, let me tell you why that phone call was the most expensive mistake Roger Daniels ever made. I joined Apex Nuclear Services in 1999 as a process safety engineer, fresh out of 8 years in the Navy's nuclear program where I'd learned that when reactor systems fail, you fix them fast or people die. Apex designed and maintained safety systems for nuclear power facilities across the eastern United States, where downtime costs millions per day and safety failures can contaminate entire regions. My role was troubleshooting complex failures in the automated safety systems that Apex had built for clients over the past 2 decades. When a nuclear facility crashed and the client's engineers couldn't diagnose the problem, they called Apex. Apex sent me. Over 25 years, I'd responded to 94 nuclear emergencies across 8 states. I'd diagnosed coolant system failures, reactor control malfunctions, safety protocol errors, sensor drift, pump cavitation, and dozens of other failure modes that could shut down multi-million-dollar power generation equipment. Most importantly, I'd developed deep institutional knowledge about the specific systems Apex had designed and installed. Every nuclear facility had unique requirements. Every installation had custom modifications. Every system had quirks and edge cases that existed only in my experience-based understanding of how those systems behaved under extreme stress. That knowledge was what made me valuable. That knowledge was also what Roger Daniels had just eliminated from Apex's available expertise at the worst possible moment. The Susquehanna crisis had started 31 hours earlier. Patricia Morgan had called our emergency hotline at 4 p.m. Eastern Time on Tuesday, reporting that Unit 1's primary coolant system had failed during routine maintenance. A nuclear reactor generates approximately $1.2 million worth of electricity per day when running at normal capacity. Unit 1 offline meant the Pennsylvania Power Authority was losing over $1 million per day in grid capacity. Apex's standard protocol for nuclear crisis response was to start with remote diagnostics. I spent 6 hours on video calls with Patricia's maintenance team, walking them through diagnostic procedures and reviewing system logs. By 10 p.m., I determined this wasn't something that could be resolved remotely. The failure pattern suggested a fundamental issue with the primary coolant pump system that managed reactor temperature control. This pump had been experiencing intermittent cavitation over the past 3 weeks, but the plant's maintenance team hadn't recognized the warning signs. I booked a flight to Pennsylvania, departing Wednesday morning at 7 a.m., arrived Wednesday at 1 p.m. local time after 6 hours of travel, including weather delays. Went directly from the airport to Susquehanna Valley Nuclear Station. Patricia met me at the security checkpoint. She looked exhausted. "Heath, thank you for coming. We've been offline for 26 hours. The Pennsylvania Power Authority is asking why we can't fix this ourselves, and the NRC is starting to ask questions about our safety protocols. Because this failure pattern indicates a problem with the custom safety interlocks we installed in 1998, I said. I need to examine the coolant control systems directly." She led me to the reactor control room. Massive monitoring systems filled with temperature gauges, pressure readings, coolant flow indicators, and the automated valve systems that managed everything with precision timing, all showing fault conditions, all costing the Power Authority $1.2 million per day. I spent the next 12 hours examining the coolant system, reviewing fault logs, testing pump performance, and tracing the cascade failure pattern. By 1 a.m. Thursday, I'd isolated the root cause, a software bug in the pump control algorithm that managed cavitation prevention across varying load conditions. Here's what happened. Susquehanna's facility had been running at variable load over the past 3 weeks due to grid demand fluctuations. The coolant pump was designed to automatically adjust flow rates to prevent cavitation during load changes, but the control algorithm had a subtle bug that accumulated timing errors over multiple load cycles. After 3 weeks of load variations, the accumulated errors had pushed the pump timing outside of acceptable parameters. The system detected this and triggered emergency shutdown protocols on Unit 1 as a safety precaution. The bug was in custom code that Apex had written specifically for Susquehanna's installation 7 years ago. That code existed nowhere else. I'd been part of the team that designed and implemented it. I was one of 2 people in the entire world who understood how it worked. Fixing it required modifying the pump control algorithm to reset timing errors periodically, updating the reactor control system firmware, recalibrating the coolant flow sensors, and conducting a controlled restart sequence that verified everything was functioning correctly before bringing the reactor back online. I estimated 16 to 20 hours of work. I started at 1:30 a.m. Thursday morning. By 3 a.m. Thursday, I'd identified the algorithm modifications and was preparing to upload updated firmware when Roger called and told me I was fired. After Roger hung up, Patricia approached me cautiously. "Heath, is everything okay? You look concerned." "I just got terminated by my employer while in the middle of fixing your reactor." Her expression went from concerned to horrified. "Terminated? But you're the only person who understands our system. What happens to our reactors?" "That's an excellent question. Apex will need to send someone else to complete the work. How long will that take?" "I don't know. The other engineer who understands this system is Wade Fisher. He's in Ohio managing a crisis at Davis-Bess. Apex might have to wait until he becomes available." "How long?" "Wade's engagement in Ohio is scheduled for another 12 days. Patricia's face went white. "We can't wait 12 days. Every day offline costs us $1.2 million in lost generation. 12 days would be over $14 million in losses, plus potential NRC penalties." "Then I suggest you contact Apex Corporate and explain the urgency." At 4:45 a.m., my phone rang again. Carl Stevens, Apex's Chief Operating Officer. "Heath, I just got off the phone with Roger. There's been a misunderstanding about your employment status. We need you to complete the Susquehanna engagement before we discuss any personnel matters." "Carl, Roger was very clear. He said my employment was terminated effective immediately." "That's not a misunderstanding, that's termination." "I understand this is confusing, but let's focus on resolving Susquehanna's crisis first. We can address your employment situation afterward." "I don't think that's appropriate. If I'm terminated, I shouldn't be working on Apex projects. If I'm not terminated, then Roger needs to call me back and clarify that he made an error." "This is a critical situation, Heath. Susquehanna is one of our largest accounts. They're losing millions per day." "Then you need to clarify my employment status first. Am I an Apex employee or not?" Long pause. I could hear Carl thinking through the implications. "Heath, let me conference in Roger so we can resolve this together." "I'd rather you didn't." Roger was clear about his decision. I'm respecting that decision by no longer working on Apex projects. If Susquehanna needs assistance, they should contact Apex's emergency response line and request another engineer. There is no other engineer available who understands Susquehanna's system. That's an unfortunate situation, but it's not my problem anymore since I'm no longer an Apex employee. I ended the call. Patricia was standing nearby, having heard my side of the conversation. What should we do, Heath? You should contact Apex and request emergency engineering support. Explain the urgency of the situation. But you're here now. You understand our system. You were in the middle of fixing it. Can't you complete the work? I was fired 90 minutes ago. I can't ethically continue working on a project for a company that just terminated my employment. What if we hired you directly, not through Apex, but as an independent consultant working for Susquehanna? I thought about that carefully. That would create contractual complications. Susquehanna has a maintenance agreement with Apex. That agreement probably has exclusivity provisions. I'll check our contract. She called Susquehanna's legal counsel, had a rapid conversation, and hung up with cautious optimism. Our legal team says the maintenance agreement has exclusivity provisions for routine maintenance, but emergency repairs can be conducted by any qualified engineer if Apex cannot provide timely support. They're defining timely support as within 24 hours. Has Susquehanna formally requested emergency support from Apex? I'll do that right now. She sent an email to Apex's emergency response team, copying me, formally requesting immediate engineering support for the reactor failure and noting that the previous engineer was no longer available. She marked it urgent and requested response within 4 hours. At 7:23 a.m., we received a response from Apex's emergency coordinator. We acknowledge your request for emergency engineering support. Our senior nuclear safety engineers are currently committed to other client emergencies. We are working to identify available resources and will provide an estimated response timeline within 8 hours. 8 hours meant Susquehanna would be offline for at least another full day, probably longer. Another $1.2 million minimum. Patricia showed me the email. What does this mean? It means Apex doesn't have anyone available to send. Wade is in Ohio, and apparently nobody else at Apex has the expertise to handle this type of failure. So we wait, unless you want to exercise your contract provision and hire an independent consultant. Are you available as an independent consultant? I could be. What would my rate be? Independent consulting rates for emergency nuclear crisis response typically range from $600 to $1,200 per hour depending on expertise level and urgency. I was at the top of the expertise scale, and this was definitely urgent. $950 per hour for emergency nuclear crisis response. Minimum 60-hour engagement to ensure complete resolution and system validation. That's $57,000 total. Payment terms: 50% deposit before I resume work, remaining 50% upon successful reactor restart. Patricia didn't hesitate. Done. I'll have our CFO process the deposit immediately. At 9:30 a.m. Thursday morning, $28,500 cleared into my business account. At 9:45 a.m., I resumed work on Susquehanna's coolant system. The work itself was methodical but complex. First, I had to complete the algorithm modifications I'd started before Roger's call interrupted me. The pump control software needed 3 specific changes: a periodic error reset function, improved load coefficient handling, and better tolerance management for accumulated timing drift. Each modification required careful testing in simulation mode before implementation. You don't upload untested firmware to a nuclear reactor. One mistake could damage equipment or create safety hazards that would make the current crisis look minor. By 2 p.m. Thursday, I'd completed the algorithm modifications and begun the firmware upload process. This took another 4 hours because reactor control systems have extensive verification protocols between updates. While the firmware uploaded, I recalibrated the coolant flow sensors. These sensors had been drifting slightly over the past 6 months, not enough to trigger maintenance alerts, but enough to contribute to the control algorithm's accumulated errors. By 7 p.m. Thursday, all firmware updates were complete and all sensors were recalibrated. Now came the critical phase, the controlled reactor restart sequence. You can't just flip a switch and restart a nuclear reactor. The startup process involves dozens of sequential steps, each with specific timing requirements and safety checkpoints. Coolant temperature must be raised gradually. Pressure must be increased in controlled stages. Control rod positions must be carefully managed to prevent thermal shock. I started the restart sequence at 7:30 p.m. Thursday. The process took 6 hours and 45 minutes of careful monitoring and adjustment. At 2:15 a.m. Friday morning, Unit 1 was back online, at full power generation with all systems functioning normally. Total downtime, 67 hours and 15 minutes. Total generation loss, approximately $3.35 million. But the reactor was running again, and the fix I'd implemented would prevent recurrence of the pump cavitation bug. Patricia was watching the power generation monitors with visible relief as electricity began flowing back into the Pennsylvania grid. Heath, I cannot thank you enough. You saved us from a disaster that would have been catastrophically worse if we'd waited for Apex to send another engineer. You're welcome. I'll prepare a technical report documenting the failure, root cause, and repair procedures. You should share that with Apex so they can update their system documentation. At 3:45 a.m. Friday morning, I received a call from Carl Stevens. Heath, I understand you completed the Susquehanna repair work as an independent consultant. That's correct. We need to discuss your employment status. Roger's decision to terminate you was premature. We'd like to offer you reinstatement with full back pay and benefits. I appreciate that, but I'm declining. I'm now operating as an independent consultant. It's more lucrative and I have better control over which projects I accept. What does that mean for Apex? It means Apex will need to develop other engineers with similar expertise or accept that your nuclear crisis response capability is significantly reduced. That's not acceptable. We have ongoing nuclear emergencies that require your specific knowledge. Then Apex should have considered that before terminating me while I was literally in the middle of managing one of those emergencies. Heath, what would it take to bring you back? I'm not interested in coming back, but I'm willing to discuss limited consulting arrangements for specific emergencies where my expertise is genuinely necessary. What would those arrangements look like? Apex can retain me as an emergency, as nuclear consultant, $950 per hour for active crisis work, $8,000 monthly retainer for availability and consultation, 6-month contract renewable at my discretion. Silence while Carl processed the numbers. My previous salary as senior nuclear safety engineer had been $165,000 annually. I was now proposing a consulting arrangement that would cost Apex approximately $96,000 annually just for the retainer, plus potentially hundreds of thousands more if they actually needed me. That's significantly more expensive than your previous compensation. That's correct, but it's less expensive than what happened at Susquehanna when you didn't have me available. They lost $3.35 million during 67 hours of downtime. They would have lost over $14 million if they'd waited for Wade. Over the next 8 weeks, I received 12 emergency calls from nuclear facilities experiencing critical failures. Each call followed the same pattern. Reactor crisis. Apex couldn't send an engineer quickly enough. Could I help as an independent consultant? I helped all 12 facilities. Total consulting revenue, $285,000 for 8 weeks of work. Word spread fast in the nuclear industry. Plant managers talked to each other at conferences. My name came up in conversations about emergency response and crisis management. By September, companies that had never worked with Apex were calling me directly. Plant managers had worked with me for years through Apex. They knew my capabilities and trusted my expertise. When their facilities faced critical failures, they wanted someone who could solve problems quickly and correctly the first time. Mr. Coleman, this is Vernon Cross at Peach Bottom Nuclear Station. We've got a cascade failure in our secondary coolant loop. Our maintenance team can't isolate the problem, and we're losing $850,000 per day. Can you help us? These calls became routine. Emergency consulting work paid well, but the real value was in long-term relationships. Companies started asking if I'd be available on retainer for future emergencies. By October, I had consulting agreements with 9 different nuclear facilities across Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, and New York. Each wanted guaranteed access to my expertise when they needed it. Combined retainer revenue, $54,000 monthly, approximately $648,000 annually, plus additional project fees for actual crisis work. The retainer contracts were smart business for everyone involved. The nuclear facilities got priority access to specialized expertise. I got steady income and advanced notice of potential work. Everyone understood the value proposition. In November, Apex formally offered me the consulting arrangement I'd proposed to Carl. $950 per hour for active work, $8,000 monthly retainer, 6-month renewable contract. I accepted because it was additional guaranteed revenue, and Apex still represented a reliable source of emergency work. That same month, Roger Daniels was terminated. The board had finally calculated the total cost of his decision to fire me during the Susquehanna crisis. The final tally was devastating for Apex. Susquehanna had reduced their annual maintenance contract by $850,000, citing concerns about Apex's crisis response capability. 4 other nuclear facilities had similarly reduced their contracts after hearing about the Susquehanna situation, costing Apex another $1.8 million in annual revenue. Apex had paid premium rates to reassign Wade Fisher from Ohio and fly him to 2 emergency sites I would normally have handled, incurring $95,000 in expedited travel and overtime costs. The company was now paying me $96,000 annually in retainer fees, plus crisis rates that were 75% higher than my previous compensation. Total cost to Apex, approximately $3.2 million in direct losses, reduced contracts, and increased consulting expenses, all traceable to Roger's decision to fire me at 3:15 a.m. while I was fixing a $1.2 million per day crisis. Carl called me in December with news of Roger's termination. "Heath, I want you to know that Apex has restructured our engineering management. Roger is no longer with the company. We've learned from this situation." "What have you learned?" "That institutional knowledge has value that isn't captured in salary comparisons. That crisis response capability requires deep expertise that can't be quickly replaced. That decisions about personnel should consider operational impact, not just budget line items. Those are expensive lessons, but important ones. We'd like to discuss bringing you back as a full-time employee. We're prepared to offer significantly improved compensation and a formal role as Director of Crisis Response Engineering." "I appreciate that, but I'm earning more as an independent consultant than I ever did as an Apex employee, and I have better work-life balance because I choose which projects to accept. Why would I give that up to return to a company that demonstrated it doesn't value expertise until after eliminating it? Because you built your career at Apex, because we value your contributions now, because we want to make this right. Carl, you can make this right by continuing our consulting arrangement and by valuing your remaining engineers appropriately. Don't repeat with someone else what Roger did to me. We've learned from the $3.2 million lesson." I stayed independent. By March 2025, I was managing 11 long-term consulting relationships with nuclear facilities across 4 states. Annual revenue was approaching $580,000. I was working approximately 60% of the hours I'd worked at Apex while earning more than 3 times my previous salary. More importantly, I was respected and valued. When clients called me for crisis response, they understood they were paying premium rates for premium expertise. Nobody questioned my methods or complained about my fees. They'd all seen what happened when production systems failed and specialized knowledge wasn't available. In April 2025, I was invited to speak at the National Nuclear Safety Conference about crisis response management. I used the Susquehanna situation as a case study, explaining how personnel decisions during active crises can create cascading consequences far beyond immediate operational impact. My presentation focused on 3 principles that had become fundamental to my consulting practice. First, institutional knowledge is operational infrastructure. When you eliminate experienced engineers during active crises, you're not reducing costs. You're destroying capabilities that took decades to develop and can't be quickly replaced. Second, crisis response expertise has economic value precisely because it's rare and difficult to replicate. Companies that treat specialized engineers as interchangeable resources learn expensive lessons when emergencies occur and critical knowledge is no longer available. Third, the cost of expertise is always less than the cost of system failure. A $950 per hour consultant who can restore a $1.2 million per day nuclear facility in 67 hours provides dramatically better return on investment than waiting 12 days for less expensive alternatives. After my presentation, 8 companies approached me about consulting arrangements. I accepted 3 additional contracts, bringing my total monthly retainer revenue to $62,000. The irony of my situation isn't lost on me. Apex originally paid me $165,000 annually to maintain their crisis response capability. Now they pay me $96,000 annually just to be available, plus $950 per hour when they actually need my services. Last year, Apex paid me approximately $180,000 total for retainer and crisis work, more than my former salary. And they're still getting better value than they would have if Roger had fired me 6 months earlier instead of mid-crisis. Here's what I learned from this experience. The most dangerous employee to terminate isn't the one who complains or threatens to quit. It's the specialist who's literally solving a crisis that nobody else understands when you decide their position is expendable. Because specialized knowledge doesn't disappear when you eliminate the specialist. The knowledge walks out the door with them. And when the next crisis occurs, and there's always a next crisis, you discover that institutional expertise can't be quickly replaced or easily substituted. Roger wanted to reduce headcount and eliminate what he saw as an expensive senior position. He achieved that goal. My position was eliminated, the headcount was reduced, and the salary expense disappeared from his budget. What he didn't anticipate was that my salary wasn't just compensation, it was insurance against the cost of operational failure. When he eliminated that insurance, he immediately discovered why it had value. 90 minutes after terminating me, he was trying to undo his decision. 14 hours later, his CEO was offering reinstatement. 8 weeks later, Apex was paying consulting rates triple my former compensation, just to maintain access to the expertise they'd eliminated. Sometimes the most effective response to being undervalued isn't argument or confrontation. It's simply allowing people to experience the full consequences of their decisions while you build something better for yourself. Roger wanted me gone. I left. Then reality taught him why nuclear expertise matters and what institutional knowledge is actually worth. That turned out to be the most expensive lesson in personnel management Roger Daniels ever received, and the most profitable career transition I ever experienced. The real value of nuclear expertise isn't measured by what you pay for it. It's measured by what you lose without it. In my case, Apex learned that lesson cost them $3.2 million, while it earned me the freedom to build a consulting practice that values specialized knowledge at its true market rate. Today, when nuclear facilities face critical failures, they don't call corporate headquarters first. They call me. Because they've learned the same lesson Apex learned the hard way. When reactor systems fail, you need someone who knows how to fix them fast, not someone who knows how to cut costs. When corporations treat expertise as overhead instead of infrastructure, they discover the difference during the next crisis, usually at 100 times the cost of keeping that knowledge in-house. The nuclear industry taught me that respect isn't earned through years of service. It's earned in the 3 a.m. phone calls when everything's broken and you're the only one who knows how to fix it.